So we have a panel on education, and which is an extraordinarily good panel, and I come to you as the moderator. I have a view that higher education is very important to one's life. My parents didn't graduate from college or high school, and so I was thinking that maybe my life would be better if I got a college degree and a law degree, and I did. And now for my sins, I've been the chairman of the board at Duke University for a number of years. I'm now the chairman of the University of Chicago board, and I'm on the Harvard Corporation board. So Einstein's definition of insanity is really serving on college boards for many, many years. And so I've served on boards, but I think it's an important thing because higher education to me is one of the greatest reasons our country has done as well as it has. And I think our universities are really our national treasures. And we say, what are the greatest assets of this country aside from the talent of the people we have and other things? I think it's our higher education institutions. So we're going to have a really good discussion today from three really leaders from different types of schools. So let me introduce them briefly, and then we'll go into discussion. So on my immediate left is Carol Quillen. Carol just finished 11 years as the president of Davidson College. Davidson is a small college, liberal arts college in the Charlotte area of North Carolina. She is a graduate of the University of Chicago, and also got her PhD at Princeton University. And Carol, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Next is Paul Alvasados. Paul is a graduate of Phillips Exeter, but also the University of Chicago undergrad. And then he got his PhD at Berkeley. And for the last 40 years or so, up until about a year ago, he was a professor at Berkeley, also became the provost at Berkeley, and is also, on his spare time, he's become one of the leading chemists in the world, and he's won every single award you can possibly win in the chemistry world, except for the Nobel Prize, which he's widely thought to be a candidate for. He's inventor of, among other things, things relating to your ability to watch color television and actually see color. That actually works very well, and he's got patents for that. And so every time you watch television or you buy television, he's getting a little royalty for that. Is that right? So, but Paul is now the president of the University of Chicago. He's been in that position for about a year, and so I spent a fair amount of time with Paul. And his wife, Nicole, is here. Where is Nicole? Nicole is right here, and she's also a chemist. They love chemistry in that family, and so they have a lot to talk about it, I guess, at night on chemistry. So on my far left is Carrie Hauser. Carrie is president of a different type of college. She is the president of Colorado Mountain College, which is, I guess, you would say a junior college type of thing, or no? What would you call it?
We're considered dual mission, which means we do bachelor's degrees, associate degrees, and specialized certificates. Okay. And a little blend of the applied and the liberal arts.
All right, and has many different campuses around the state of Colorado. She is herself a native of Arizona, graduate of University of Arizona, and PhD from UCLA. And she's a big outdoors person, and she has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. She has climbed Mount Rainier, the base camp of Everest, and the 56 tallest mountains in Colorado. And we have that in common because I have flown over all of those things. So, okay, so let's talk first. The most famous graduate of Davidson is Stephen Curry, right? Now, did he actually get his degree?
Yes, he just got his degree. Stephen left Davidson after his junior year, went to the NBA, and while preparing for the NBA finals this past year, also finished a senior thesis in sociology on gender equity in sport and graduated with a class of 2022.
Wow.
So he is a college graduate. So
do you have a major in three-point shooting or anything like that there?
No, but we at Davidson College specialize in transferable skills, deep education, where the things you learn in class are transferable to what you do in the world. And I would say that the focus on discipline and creativity kind of defined Stefan's approach to basketball, just like I defined his approach to sociology. So I think it ended up being a really good place for him. And our coach had a great eye for talent that no one else could see, I guess. And so we lucked out with him.
All right, and so you've stepped down, and now you're on sabbatical.
I stepped down actually July 31st, but yes, I am stepping down. I'm going on sabbatical.
So, Paul, Coach K at my alma mater, Duke University, stepped down as the basketball coach recently. University of Chicago doesn't have a great basketball team. Have you thought of asking him to come coach your basketball team?
He could apply. I would say, we don't have a Steph Curry, but at least nobody does, exactly, absolutely unique. The only person that comes to mind is Adam Silver, who's the commissioner of the NBA and is a law grad. Mm-hmm. And he's been a strong proponent of free expression for athletes, which I think has been terrific, very consistent with kind of the U Chicago style.
All right, and do you have a basketball team as well? Or?
I'd like to say that our job is to make sure that there are nurses, teachers, law enforcement professionals, and emergency responders whenever you all need it. That's who we train in these mountain communities.
So let's talk about some serious parts about higher education. Right now, there is a view in some parts of the country that some people should not go to college, that maybe they're not fit for college or that it's not appropriate for them. The four-year colleges like Davidson or University of Chicago just aren't appropriate. Is that a fair view that some people should be happy to go be a plumber or electrician and just they're not fit for college? Or is college only to get people a better job and not to kind of educate them about being better citizens? So what do you think about the movement to say to some people you're not really appropriate for college, or do you think it's wrong?
I think the question is, what is it that learners want from let's just call it the post-secondary educational sector? So if we have people who, for example, are returning from the military, and what they want is, who've had vast experience in, life, and get many of the things by doing that we claim we give our students in a four-year residential institution, we should ask them, what do you want? And how can we most effectively and efficiently get you that thing? So if you want to go to law school, how do we get you the credits that you need based on your life experience so that you can go to law school? If you want a real estate license, how do we get you that? So I don't think we've listened appropriately to learners. I think we've focused exclusively on, some abstract debate about what college should be. And if we paid attention to what our country is looking for from the post-secondary educational sector, we would be much more differentiated, people would have a much wider range of choice, and we would be better able to serve them no matter what they wanted to do.
Now, in a place like Davidson, how many undergraduates do you have?
2,000.
Right. So is the biggest problem of the undergraduates face outside the classroom, is it drug abuse, sexual violence, mental health, suicide? What would you say are the biggest problems? These are alcoholism? What are the biggest problems that undergraduates are facing today outside of the classroom?
So one of the things we try to do at Davidson, and this is true at a lot of institutions, is we try to bring together in a highly residential community, right? So 95% of the students live on campus, and most of the rest of them are abroad or somewhere else. 90% of them live on campus. So we try to create a community where they must learn how to live with people who are different. So I think our biggest challenge now, to be honest, is less those things that you mentioned, which are clear challenges, but rather how do we continue to educate people for life in a pluralistic, heterogeneous society in a very polarized country? How do we ask our students to come to us and genuinely learn to live with people who practice different religions, speak different languages, come from different cultures, and have very different beliefs? And if we can do that, then that empowers them to do whatever they want to do post-grad.
In the classroom, is the most common question students ask, is this going to be on the exam? Do you ever ask that?
No.
They don't ask that anymore?
I'm a historian by training, and I don't give exams. So my students write papers and do research. So, okay. But I think it's interesting. Faculty have changed how they grade now. So grading used to be about ranking your students, 1 to 100. Kind of comparing them and ranking them 1 to 100. Now we ask the question, how can we use grades to maximize the learning of each person in the class? So then grades become a different kind of a thing, and they're not about ranking people. And that helps students also focus on learning.
Paul, you have about 50,000 people applying each year to University of Chicago, and you accept about maybe 40?
God, when I applied, there weren't 50,000 people applying.
Maybe this,
I wouldn't get in.
I wouldn't get in.
So about 6%, 7% get in or something. So what's the best way to get in the University of Chicago? I mean, you have to be a superstar student, or?
It's very straightforward. There's the quirky questions. that are asked, and writing just a really good explanation for your relationship to those questions. What is it? University of Chicago really, the student who comes there and thrives is somebody who really is interested in knowledge and wants to learn and has a, that kind of focus. And the questions are always asked that are, they're just kind of like a David Rubenstein question. I mean, I don't know where you learned how to ask questions, but it must have been at the University of Chicago, because you ask unusual ones, and that's what those questions are like, and they're looking for somebody who can answer those with some creativity, but also showing that they care about knowledge, right? That's probably the best thing you could do, to show that there's a connection, that you really actually care about knowledge. That's probably the best thing you could do.
So the president of the university, do you ever get people calling you up and say, look, I've given $50 million to the university, and my child is applying, and he or she got rejected, can you look into it? Does that ever happen?
No, although I will say...
They're not going to get rejected,
I will say,
right?
I've only been in the job for a year, David, so, we'll find out, but no. Actually, I think people really, I think it's important for universities, and it's a little bit building on something Carol was just saying, there are many different kinds of institutions, and the important thing is for students to really have a chance to learn more about the institutions that they want to apply to and try to find a good fit. If they find a good fit, it's going to go well. And, even a very wealthy student, if they come to the University of Chicago but they don't like learning, it's not going to be fun for them. They're not going to have a great experience.
Speaking of the word fun, it used to be said that is where fun went to die, University of Chicago. That's not true. Of course, both of you went there. You had fun, right?
I sure did.
I sure did, yeah.
Okay, so where did that expression come from, and how are you trying to tell people that this is not where fun goes to die? Fun thrives there.
Well, just come and visit, and you'll feel the good energy. It's a joyful place, actually, because people really like what they're doing. But I will say, when I was a student, for example, it was really fun, and we learned things. I got to be a part of, for example, even though I was a chemistry major, I got to be heavily involved in doc films. I learned a tremendous amount about how film is made and what it does and all those kinds of things. So it was a kind of fun, but it was also, it was a kind of brainy fun place. It's a brainy fun place.
The first chancellor at Berkeley was named Clark Kerr, and he famously said that to be a good university president, you only have to worry about three things. Parking for the faculty, sports for the alumni, and sex for the students. So which of those three is actually the most important?
Well, you always want to make the faculty happy, and so parking is a good start. But, I will say that, just as an example, to give you a feeling for what the place is like and why it is kind of a fun place. Recently, we created a gaming institute. And so if you go into the computer science area, there's this phenomenal ground floor where students, faculty, actually community members, people who live nearby, are coming in and helping to create and invent new games. And they're having so much fun. It just feels almost unfair, and yet they're connecting it very much with their studies. And so, that's a good example of what it's like to have, what you can do to make a university be a place that they find both fun and impactful.
Okay. How many students do you have in your college?
15,000. We have 11 campuses that are sprinkled around the mountain ski resort towns.
And are these full-time students, or they do other?
Full-time equivalent is about 5,000.
And the degree that they typically get is an associate degree or a bachelor's degree?
It depends on the campus. We have 3 fully residential campuses. Those are typically bachelor's degree pursuing students. At our non-residential campuses, those could be students that are, doing a nurse aid program or a culinary arts program. They could be enrolled in the Isaacson School and be a professional photography student. So we really our job is to serve these mountain resort communities, and interestingly, they pay for us. So we actually have, for those of you who are homeowners, thank you very much, you actually have a line on your property tax statement, and our job is to return on the investment that you make in us and make sure that you have all of that critical workforce in these mountain communities. And we do some, very unique things. Avalanche science, for example. I think we have the only program in the country out of our Leadville campus. We're also a Hispanic serving institution, which you might not think about in these pretty high, sort of affluent mountain towns. But there is definitely a population that we serve that are first-generation immigrant students. We're completely open access, so the only requirement for us is you walk in the door.
So what percentage of your students are first generation?
Oh, I don't know that I have that number, but I would speculate probably more than half, and I would also say that we have students, oftentimes you say college or college student, and your default is these sort of young people in the front. It's like an 18-year-old out of high school. We have as many people and learners come to us with their bachelor's degree in hand, and then they want to get a specialized certificate, or many of you have taken classes at Colorado Mountain College for sort of lifelong learning, or you want to upskill. We certainly have seen that during the pandemic. So we don't have any sequencing really either. Everyone's welcome, whether you're a very traditional age college student or you come back to us or decide that you want to pursue a college degree later in life.
What percentage of your students graduate or get a degree of one type or another?
Again, depends a little bit on the campus and the program, but we're, I don't know, we're probably about 40% earn a degree or credential in whatever those numbers are, and that's fairly high for an open access institution.
And if people get an associate degree, do they typically ever go to a four-year college later or go to get a bachelor's degree at some other place?
Well, a lot of them will stay with us. We're actually considered by the Department of Education a four-year institution. So some of them will come to us sort of open access, not thinking that they're going to pursue a bachelor's degree or go on, and they'll actually stay with us. One of the reasons for that is we're the most affordable opportunity that they have because of that very generous subsidy that I mentioned. So you cannot pursue a degree at any less cost, and I would say at any higher value, that if you live in our communities and have an opportunity to take advantage of that subsidy.
So if somebody applies to your school, what's the chance of getting in? Is it a higher?
100%.
100%. You take everyone.
We take everyone. We are open access, entirely open access.
Okay, let me ask you another question. What is it like to actually get to the base camp at Mount Everest?
It is a remarkable experience, and we did it in November, which is not when most people climb to the base camp. And so when we got there, there was not a soul there other than a few prayer flags floating in the wind. And so to have base camp entirely to ourselves was pretty special.
If I took a helicopter to go to the base camp, would that count as being at the base camp? You have to climb.
Sure.
Not sure. Okay, and I mean, every weekend you find a mountain in Colorado and climb it because you've done 56 of the tallest mountains. How many mountains are there in?
Oh, there's a lot more than that, but those are, many of us know them as 14ers. They're 14,000 feet or above, and there are actually 58 of them. I have 2 remaining, so I'm going to get to them eventually.
When you get to the top, do you ever like bears chasing after you or anything?
No, occasionally a mountain goat.
No, mountain goats, but you like bear spray or anything? You don't take that?
If they're going to help carry my water or anything else, they're welcome to come with us.
Okay. So, Paul, why is it that great universities, University of Chicago and other great universities we're familiar with, research universities, people in Congress don't seem to like them very much. They impose an endowment tax on your endowment, which is the first time ever. Is it because they think that faculties and students are too liberal and people in Congress don't want them to be so liberal? Why is it that universities aren't beloved by members of Congress, even though they all went to colleges?
Yeah, well, maybe it relates a little bit to some of your earlier questions, and I do think that we're at this moment where universities actually have become even more important for society in so many ways, because really we're at a point where the creation of new knowledge is what propels society in a very direct way. And so I think universities have become a focal point of discussion to a much higher degree, precisely because they're so much more important to what happens in our economy, in our culture, and other ways. So they've become, more intensely contested in that way. And personally, my view is that I would like to see our universities become more engaged with society in trying to address the hard problems. Working with, for example, the community colleges in the Chicago area where there's just a lot of struggle, or working on problems of urban wealth creation or climate and energy. I think when universities do that, they'll build stronger ties with the society around it. And so, I think when we're too divorced and off into a corner and yet so important for the future, that's when people become frustrated.
Can you explain what you actually invented that is so unique. I can't really explain it.
Okay.
What is your invention that revolutionized television, among other things, in words that I can understand?
Okay, so I've been involved for many years, along with friends around the world, in creating nanocrystals, very, very tiny crystals. They're ones where you could count the atoms in them. You could say, okay, there's 10, there's 100, and so on. So very, very small objects like that. And it turns out, just to give a quick feeling for it, if you've ever been to one of those science museums where you throw a ball into that funnel-shaped object and they go faster and faster as they go down? Okay, so you have a tiny crystal, and if you put extra energy in it to excite one of the electrons, it will move around inside there, and the smaller the crystal, the faster it will move. And then when it goes back down, it relaxes that energy that you put in. It will emit light, and that color will depend on the size. The smaller the crystal, the bluer the color, because that electron was moving faster. And that makes colors that can match exactly to the colors of the receptors in your eye. So when you put those little crystals into these displays, they cover the color range that your eye is capable of perceiving, all of the colors. So suddenly, the television would go from these very unnatural kind of colors that you'd see in Mad Men or something, and then suddenly they'll become the colors that are just much more lifelike. And maybe many people noticed that about 10 years ago, the colors inside televisions just became a lot more accurate. And that's still happening. That's an example of technology that came out of that.
You're a world-famous chemist, and you're obviously one of the best chemists in the world. You get voted that all the time. Why would somebody with that kind of reputation want to be an academic administrator, where you have to beg faculty to do certain things, you have to go raise money? Why would you want to go torture yourself to do that when you could be a chemist and be famous for being one of the world's leading chemists?
Well, I see the two as really tied with each other, my research life and my life in service at the university. And so what I find actually is that the role that I'm involved in my administrative world is a very hopeful one. It's about, I think of the university as a place that concentrates hope and talent. All these amazing people come together wanting to create new things. And that's what we do in my lab. That's people come together and they're trying to help each other to learn how to discover something new. So I see them as they're on different scales, but they're fundamentally really the same thing. And it's fun. I got to go on a set of tours in my first 6 months and visit every single part of the university and spend a day there. Meet the students, meet the faculty, see the space. I wish all of you could have the experience of visiting every part of a modern great research university. It's beautiful. You just see all parts of human knowledge trying to make the world a better place. How could you not like that?
Okay, so you're happy.
Yeah.
So when you got your PhD you got your undergraduate degree at University of Chicago in American history, and you obviously didn't like American history, so you got your PhD in European history. Why you couldn't decide which one you liked the best?
So one of the great things about Chicago when I was there, and I'm sure this is still true, is that there were a lot of general requirements, and so your major choice was pretty flexible. There weren't a lot of requirements in any one major. And when I did American history, I studied the colonial America, so I was interested in Puritanism. And I wanted to move back in time to understand where Puritanism came from. So I moved gradually back in time at Princeton. Also, to be honest, I met Peter, I don't know if Peter Brown is a scholar of late antiquity. I knew nothing about late antiquity, didn't know the languages I needed to know, but the quality of his mind, his mind is a once in a generation mind. And so I learned a lot of things I didn't know at all so that I could have the chance to study with them.
So who was the greatest American in American history? Walter would say Benjamin Franklin maybe, but who would you say is the greatest American in American history?
That's a hard question, that's a hard question. Geez.
Your favorite American historian?
A favorite American historian, maybe John Hope Franklin. Is a great American historian.
University of Chicago.
Yes.
Okay, so,
I'm not an idiot.
Let me ask you this. When you get a PhD, because of the requirements, the PhDs were set up, in the 1,000 years ago or so. you had to get a foreign language. You had to learn a foreign language. But why, it seems to me it'd be better to learn how to do fundraising, because people that become university presidents or even academics, they spend a large part of their time fundraising rather than speaking foreign languages. So what percentage of your time at Davidson did you spend fundraising?
I mean, you spend a good deal of time fundraising, but I think the point of, if you don't believe in what you're trying to do, then you can't fundraise for anything. When I was at Chicago, I worked at the ABA, the American Bar Association, trying to cold call people and ask them to give to the ABA. I was terrible at it. I was awful because I didn't understand what I was doing. At Davidson, and I'm sure this is true for my colleagues here, I believe powerfully that education is liberating, and that when you learn, analytical frameworks and facts that help you make sense of the world around you, you feel empowered, and that is an incredible gift that we can give to the next generation. So I believe in what happens at Davidson. I believe in bringing people together from different backgrounds and making them live together. I believe in scholarships and being need blind and meeting need without loans. I believe in the things Davidson, I believe in the educational value of sports. So when you believe in what you're raising money for, it feels less like fundraising and more like asking for allies in a really crucial mission.
So when you ask somebody for money when you're president and they say yes right away, do you think you didn't ask for enough?
So honestly, that's not how, to me, we talk about what you want to do, talk about this game, sorry, but Jesus is an example of gaming, right? So we want to build a gaming institute, and you get people excited about that, and then they say, well, what will that take?
Okay.
And then you try to figure out what it would take, right?
Okay. You don't have to fundraise, is that right, Karen?
We do have a foundation.
You do fundraise.
Yes.
So you get money from alums or from who?
We have generous donors that are in the room. I see the red
Okay.
mix,
You
and
have alum
I
people here.
see others in the room.
Okay. And what's the best way to get money from somebody? Is it to tell them you really don't need it, or they're going to go to heaven if they give you the money, or what is the best approach?
You introduce them to a student.
Okay.
And you let students tell their story about why those investments are so important, and why specific, centers of excellence or programs at your institution help students and help learners and help communities succeed. I mean, that's what they're doing, right? They're investing in that and a cause, and they're putting something that they care about into their passions. I see Carol and Gordon Siegel are very generous donors to the college, and they pick specific things that they want to make sure have the right funding and don't have as many strings attached to it as well. I think that's the other thing that's very important.
So you have graduation ceremonies once a year?
We just had 15 of them in May, yes.
15?
15.
And who's happier, the parents or the students at those?
It's both. Interesting, I will say I can't attend all of our commencements because they happen over one weekend. But I was at our Leadville campus this year, and we had all of our GED, our graduate, essentially high school equivalency. We work closely with high schools to make sure that anyone that didn't complete high school has an opportunity to do that. And those not young people, mostly Latina, women, I'd say kind of my age, let's say that, who walked across that stage all in tears for something that they didn't get to do when they were in high school. It was probably one of the more powerful experiences I've had because we hadn't had that group of, we typically had a separate graduation for those students, and we included them in the main ceremony, and it was very powerful.
Paul, you have an enormous number of Nobel Prize winners at the University of Chicago. If you tell a new Nobel Prize winner to do something, do they listen, or they say, I won a Nobel Prize and I don't have to listen, or are they hard to deal with, or they're easy to deal with?
One of my predecessors, the amazing Hannah Gray, the other day, she was giving me some advice about being university president. It's a little bit like being the attendant at a graveyard. There are a lot of people underneath you, but it's awfully hard to get them to do anything. But actually, my real experience is a little bit different. And actually, I find that the community actually really wants the community of people inside the university and the community nearby actually want to do something to make this world a better place. So they're pretty open to ideas about how to cooperate and make things happen. Of course, you have to connect. I mean, you have to talk with the things that they're interested in doing, but as long as you can find those connection points, then people really come together. They try to build stuff.
Who causes bigger problems for a university president? Students, faculty, administrators, alums, or donors?
More problems? Well, gee, I mean,
Who's the hardest to deal with?
Neighbors?
the neighbors?
The neighbors?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Actually, maybe that's true. Maybe more locally where we are, the community really wants us to partner with them because there's a lot of, the impacts of history have been so bad, and they want some partnership. They all can contribute both in hard ways and easy ways. It all depends, right? I mean, I'm not going to pick one out of that group because they're all involved and they all care a lot. And if we do something that strays from the real core values of the university, they'll be upset, and that's good. They should be.
Well, when I was an undergraduate, I might have had at Duke, maybe 1% of the undergraduate body was from overseas.
Yeah.
Now we have large percentages of foreign students in our undergraduate schools and graduate schools. Is it a good thing for our country to educate these foreign students who, let's say they're going to go back to their country? Is that a good thing because they're going to go back to their country and contribute to that country? Or is it a bad thing because they're not going to contribute to our country by staying here? Why do we want to have all these foreign students, or why should we want to have all these foreign students?
What makes our society so strong and what has made our knowledge economy second to none has been the openness, the fact that we're open to all peoples. And we're not at the. Did you say 50% first gen? I think we're at 15% first gen, and I think now we're about 17% Pell and so on. But in terms of the immigration aspect, I think that's what makes this country great. I'm very grateful myself because my parents were refugees after the Civil War in Greece, so that changed my life completely. But I think we all know that the people who make the journey here and then go into the universities, that they are part of what propels our society forward in so many different ways. So we should be thankful and open to that, always.
So you went to undergraduate at University of Chicago, your PhD at Princeton, you taught at Rice for a long time. Now Davidson's a small school with maybe 2,000 undergrads or something like that. What's the advantage of going to a small liberal arts college versus a major research university for an undergraduate experience?
So there are a couple things. One, I think our students come to us because they want the opportunity to work, to do original research right away with faculty. There are no graduate students at Davidson, so it's the undergraduates that are working with the faculty in their research.
Check 1, 2, yeah.
And that. And secondly, they want to live in a community where they get to change the institution. I was telling Paul when we were talking about this panel that it never occurred to me at Chicago
Check 1,
that
2,
I,
yeah.
as a student, could have any impact on that institution at all. It just never crossed my mind. Whereas at a smaller place where students have a big voice, I think it's possible to imagine that you can leave the institution better than you found it, and I think our students like that. They like the holistic aspect of Davidson education, mind, body, spirit, and they like the fact that students come to Davidson for all different kinds of reasons and are able to chart their own path through a liberal arts education. So if you want to be a pre-med student and play Division I sports, you can do that. If you want to create your own major, you can do that. If you want to study internationally for 3 semesters, you can do that. So because we're smaller, we can be a lot more flexible. So it's a good place for lots of kids, not for everybody.
For all of you, any regrets about going into higher education in your career? No wishes you had gone into private equity or something more important? No? No regrets?
Not one.
Would you like to be a university president? Do you?
So, okay, we have time for questions from the audience. I'll just call on people as soon as I can. One here first. If somebody's mic is coming to you. Sheila?
Hi, I'm Sheila Johnson. Hi, David. We do a lot of work together. I want to ask each one of the presidents, what is your diversity policy? I'd like to know what the percentages are. And when you opened with a question, and it's been bothering me ever since I've been sitting here, do you feel as though everyone should go on to higher education? Because I think there's so many wonderful alternatives, and you have given them. I really believe in vocational training. I head up a strategic committee, Greater Washington Partnership, where we are now really focusing on vocational education, because we got to reduce the crime rate. And it's because there's so many kids that are not given a chance. And we have got to restructure our communication of how we put that messaging out there, because everybody can be educated and should be educated on their terms. And I think that's what's important. But I'm going to go back to the diversity. How are you all dealing with the diversity equation of getting more students into your institutions?
Okay, why don't we just go down, diversity in your campus?
So I would say a couple things about that. First, with respect to hiring, faculty, senior administrators, and staff, if you have an open and equitable process, you create a more diverse pool. That means you go and find candidates. And so just in we've had great success at diversifying the faculty and the upper level administration at Davidson because we actually ran equitable searches. We ran searches that were open to everybody. We looked for candidates in all different places. When we ran those searches with an eye towards finding the best person for the job and not with any preconceptions about what that person had to look like. With respect to students, it's similar. You have to go and find, Davidson's a great place, and there are a lot of students for whom Davidson would be perfect who've never heard of the place. So how do we reach those students so that they know that, one, we're need blind, two, we meet need, we do it without loans in the packages. You can graduate debt-free from Davidson if you just apply, right? So how do we get that word out? And then I would say the most important thing that we're slower in doing in higher ed is actually becoming an inclusive community, right? Davidson was all male, all white, all Christian when it was founded. And that's not inclusion. And we can't just say to people, hey, you can come in now and become just like us. That is not inclusion. You have to ask yourself, how do we build an institution that genuinely creates a space where everybody can participate in free inquiry, where everybody feels like they can actually learn, and where everybody feels welcome and can find a home. And that means changing the culture of an institution and recognizing things that we take for granted or have always done that are not inclusive, that by definition marginalize people. Like if you're gonna have women faculty, you have to build restrooms they can use in the buildings where their offices are, right? I mean, that's not rocket science. So I think it's a basic, creating that inclusive environment that will make us genuinely open.
Check,
and,
1, 2.
Will make
1,
people
2.
for whom Davidson's a good place want to be there.
Okay.
So, let me say, first of all, thank you for the question, and that if we look, for example, at our undergraduate population over the last decade, we've made, I think, enormous progress in diversifying, and so we'll be about 20% Hispanic undergraduate students, about 15% African American this year, as well as we have just under 10% people from very remote rural communities, a growing percentage of veteran scholars, and so on. And there's a series of programs that we run over multiple years to also help bring students into universities and colleges, like the Adelante program and so on, that are really quite good, pre-collegiate programs that I think do a lot there, and we can do a lot more. So I think there's a deep commitment at the institution to doing that. But I'd like to come to something that you mentioned that is very important to me. When the university was first created, its first president was William Rainey Harper, and he had this concept that the University of Chicago would be part of a network of institutions. And so he created what he called the affiliates, and at one time there were 160 Midwestern institutions of learning that were associated and affiliated with the university in a partnership. And these included, essentially, he founded the first community college in Illinois, as well as had programs like correspondence degrees, and he had faculty actually literally taking the trains from Chicago and teaching classes along all the train station stops all through the Midwest. So he was essentially imagining remote education and distributed campuses, and his real vision was of a network of institutions that supported each other and offered different kinds of education matched to what the needs of the students were. And I just think we need to get back to that as quickly as we possibly can and be building partnerships between these institutions. There's lots of things that we can do together that if we try to do them as separate entities, we won't be as successful at.
My answer would be yes. I think we should prepare every person to have the option to pursue post-secondary education so that they have that option, whether it's right out of high school or they go into some other career and break their back or something happens and we have an opportunity for them to come in the door in sort of different sequences. When I arrived at Colorado Mountain College almost 9 years ago, our Hispanic student population was about 13%. We realized and recognized what our K-12 population pipeline is in these mountain resort communities that essentially fuel the economy and fuel the workforce. A lot of first-generation immigrant Latino families. So we spent a lot of time working with our high school partners to get kids ready, whether they came to Colorado Mountain College or went someplace else. We were named a Hispanic serving institution about a year ago. Our Hispanic Latino population is now 30%. And that took a lot of very intentional effort. And that's really the population that that's in sort of these mountain communities. But I would also say that inclusivity comes with serving people of different age. If you're coming into higher education at 38 or 54 or whatever age, that climate and those environments and those classrooms need to speak to you as well, because you haven't been in that environment for a very long time. So it's language, it's translating, it's sort of all those things that we think about. And it's why my institution is fairly unique. I mean, we were founded on this premise of it was an open door for everyone. And the early pioneers went and bushwhacked around these mountain communities and said, if we don't create a post-secondary option in these sort of resort rural mountain towns, people have to leave. They have to go to Boulder or Fort Collins or leave the state. And so they said, we're going to start it ourselves, and literally put us on a ballot. And we were created by a vote, and we are actually a taxing district as a result. And what I said earlier is our job is to make sure that we serve essentially the economy of these mountain resort towns. And because we're the only thing in town, that's why we offer a blend of bachelor's, certificates, associates, and liberal arts and applied science, because otherwise you have to leave. You have to leave to pursue those degrees someplace else. We do not do graduate programs. But the premise of everything that we stand for is everyone's welcome, and we try to make sure that that environment is really inclusive. The only finer point I'll put on this is sometimes we forget this. During the pandemic, we lost males. Our greatest decline in enrollment were males, and they were white males. They went into construction, they left. I think it was on the description for this panel. Many thought, particularly in some of our rural communities, thought that higher education was too liberal. It wasn't for them. It wasn't a place where they were welcome either. And so we're taking a good hard look at the unintended consequences as well, and sort of exploring this notion of expansion in addition to inclusion. How do we bust open who we are as an institution and expand out to make sure that we serve everyone?
Okay, one more, okay. We have 1 minute, is that right? How much time? 1 minute? 2 minutes? All right, Walter?
I wanted to just follow up on Sheila Johnson's question because Salamander, her company, is taking over the hospitality and resort here, and I was really going to direct it at Carrie, which is how do you form a pipeline for, because her question was somewhat about not just higher education, with all due respect to Paul, for knowledge sake, but higher education so that you can become culinary, you can become this and that. So how do you say our job is not just knowledge for its sake, but we're going to serve like Salamander when it takes over the Aspen campus?
And that's what we do, is we speak to you first. You're a shareholder. You are now a shareholder of Colorado Mountain College, and our job is to make sure that you have the employees, you have diverse employees. I mean, one of the things that you might not think about at our little Aspen campus that's not too far from here, one of our smaller campuses, is that a lot of our English second language, you might think that those are Spanish learning English, they're from all over the world because they're coming here to work in Aspen. And they need to be able to be behind a front desk, whether they're, whatever job or whatever, career track they're in. We try to make sure that we can integrate and make sure that that inclusivity piece is part of that training as well. So we serve all the ski resort communities in Colorado, ski area operations. If you're going to learn to, drive a snowcat or manage a ski area. Nurses, we work very closely with our local hospitals. I mean, just about if you get banged up or find yourself at one of our local clinics, very likely you're going to be with a nurse or a nurse practitioner who's been trained by us. If you happen, like I do occasionally, to get pulled over by one of our local sheriffs or our Aspen Police Department, they've probably also been trained by us. And that's, again, our job is to make sure we do that. So we listen very closely, Walter, to what the needs of the community are. And we do also liberal arts. I mean, I think Carol's point is we need to also make sure that people know how to think and be critical, especially this week in this country. That's all I'm going to say. And to be engaged and to be at the table. So it's something that we are here so that you learn something that you know how to do, and you also can go in and learn how to think and be a good, engaged citizen.
Okay, so I think we're out of time. I'd just like to thank our panelists for giving us a very good overview of education from different perspectives, and thank you for your insights and putting up with some of my questions, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.